Greetings to everyone, and welcome to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose. I'm Darius, and we are going to be continuing on with this book in this video. We're going to continue to Chapter 3. If you didn't listen to Chapter 2, I would go back, link in the description, and we're continuing on.
All right, class. Eyes back on me. We will be continuing on and evolving our animations into motion animations.
My teacher yelled to the class of 8 students, including myself. We all looked back up to the teacher as he began to teach the techniques and steps to create such a thing. Looking around, I could see others were half asleep and didn't really care about the topic. I also had that one student that never shut their mouth. The one who thinks they're smarter and better than everyone else, so the world should bend before them. I knew, though, that deep down under the surface, that student was the one who struggled the most in the class. As for me, I watched the teacher in amazement as I continued learning. I wanted to be successful in this class. I wanted to prove to everyone that a girl with no background knowledge of animation could make some great projects with it. Well, to be honest, I really wanted to show up that know-it-all student, but I did want success in all my classes. College was a big deal for me. I wanted to make my family proud. Not that they weren't proud already. I had an associate's degree in graphic design and was currently on my way to getting another one in interactive media design. I just didn't want to let them down. They meant too much to me. Plus, I was paying thousands of dollars just to get these degrees. I wasn't about to let them slip through my fingers.
All right, guys. Class time is up. Thanks for coming, and I will see you all next week.
My instructor said finally at 11 o'clock. I then proceeded to pack up my things and head to the door. I walked out to my car and drove out of the city where my college was. The traffic wasn't too terrible. It was a small town after all. But it had its moments where it was bad. Regardless, it still made me anxious to drive in. I didn't like when cars would crowd me as I was trying to transport myself. I much preferred the backcountry roads where there were no cars and easy driving. Luckily, I never needed to drive in the city for long if I went to school. I lived out in the countryside about 30 minutes away from town. It was perfect. Nothing but beautiful openness and back roads. I didn't have to deal with the sound of cars, crashes, or people honking their horns in anger. Where I lived, my house was surrounded by fields and woods. The sound of farm machinery, animals walking in the woods, and wind blowing were practically my everyday life. The fields that ran along our yard were owned by my father. If he wasn't at home, he was either on the farm feeding the animals or playing with machinery. He would ask me for my help in spring and summer as hay had to be cut and seeds needed to be planted. Since I had been a college student, though, he has let me focus on my schooling. I still do try and help him as best I can, though. I still worked on the farm milking cows in the morning. It was a way to make a living and help my dad at the same time. Yep, the countryside was my preferred lifestyle. I pulled in the driveway and walked myself into the house. Through the garage and into the basement I entered. The basement was the main entrance to the house. It was furnished with a TV, dartboard, carpet, a dinner table with chairs, and a love seat. Nothing too fancy. I took off my shoes and proceeded up the stairs to the main floor. I seen my 2 little dogs locked in their kennels and my big dog laying on her bed sleeping. I looked at the counter and spotted a note from my mother. It read,
Abby, I went to town for a few errands while you were at school. The dogs are fine to stay in their kennels and you can do your homework. Love you, Mom.
She was always informative like that. always wanted to make sure I knew where she was at all times. No matter where she went, she had to inform me, whether it was as simple as going downstairs to do the laundry or going to town for a few things. I'm so used to her doing that, I even began to do it with her. We made sure that the other knew where they were in case of an emergency or if we needed each other for something. I don't know why, but it created a sense of safety that I always liked. Besides the point, she was in town and the house was quiet. I was able to work on my schoolwork without all the ruckus. So I took advantage of the opportunity and logged onto my computer. After 45 minutes had passed, I saw myself almost done with my project. It was a video game design document that I had to complete for an assessment in interactive design and authoring. Each student had to come up with a game idea and fill out a document explaining different aspects of their game, such as camera angles, environments, unique features, etc. As I was moving on to the final part, I heard a loud creak from the corner of my room. I turned myself to face where the sound came from. I tried to see if something fell down around the area, but there was nothing that could have fallen. The guinea pigs were on the dresser and the cage was stapled on it. The backdrop still stood where it was. So what in the world could have made that sound? It could have been the house creaking. That I knew happened sometimes. So I decided to go with that idea and focus back on my schoolwork. After a couple minutes, I finished my project. All 10 pages of gaming details and drawings done and out of the way. I started to smile, realizing what I accomplished. I checked my phone and saw the time. It was 12:30 p.m. This was perfect. I was done with all my schoolwork. I could get into cosplay and film. And with that, I got up from my chair and stretched my body. I extended myself towards the ceiling, releasing all the tension from my muscles and spine. After I was done, I opened my phone for notifications and seen that Damien texted me 5 minutes ago. The text read,
Hey, Abby. I am just reminding you that our friend meetup is at 6 tonight. I know how distracted you can get with your schoolwork, and I just wanted to remind you. I can't wait to see you.
I texted back a reply to him. Hey, Damien. Sorry I didn't text you right away. I just finished up my schoolwork, so no worrying about that. I will be there. Thank you for the reminder. I can't wait to see you either. I started to put the phone down and take a step when it suddenly ringed again. I gazed at it to see that it was Damien sending a smiling emoji. I sent one back and reflected on our friendship we had. Damien was such a great guy. He always seemed to come to me for serious talks and such. I mean, it was common for my friends to come to me for everything. I was the mama of the friend group after all. For example, when I went to my senior prom, I was the one holding all the ladies' purses within my friend group as they all danced with their dates. I was the one taking pictures, capturing their cute moments, and taking charge of them when they were getting out of line. Sometimes, I felt like they all respected me and treated me like a mom rather than a friend. And I was okay with that. However, when it came to Damien, he was different. He would be the one to always come up and ask me how I was doing, or if I was okay. It was almost like he knew when I was putting on an act for the group, and came up to me privately later on to talk about it. He was truly a good friend. In the middle of my thoughts, I heard a knock at my door.
Abby, sweetheart, can I come in?
It was my mom. I didn't even hear her come home. She must have snuck in while I was thinking about Damien. I guess I was just that drowned in my thoughts. Of course you can, Mom. I spoke, accepting her request. She came into the room and gazed at me with affection. I could see the love in her eyes as if she hadn't seen me for a long time.
Hello, my love. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm pretty good myself. Just got back from town. I picked up some new curtains for the kitchen windows and a new faucet to replace the old one. Now I just need to get your father to install it for me.
The joke that came out of my mom's mouth made both of us laugh. My father was always busy with one thing or another when it came to the farm. He would always start a bunch of projects at the same time and have a hard time finishing them. It was difficult for him to balance what was most important to least important. Or it could just be that he got ants in his pants and wanted to rip shit apart. Either way, my dad always managed to fill his plate. We both laughed for a minute and composed ourselves.
Anyways, did you get your schoolwork done for the day?
I actually just finished a minute or two ago. Now I get to just relax and hang out until I have to leave for my friend meetup.
Okay, sounds good. One final thing. I just wanted to remind you that we are having lunch at your grandparents' house after church on Sunday.
Okay, Mom. Thanks for the reminder. I love you.
I love you too.
Mom said as she gathered me up in her arms for a hug. She kissed my head and unwrapped me from her arms. As she started to leave the room, she glanced back at me as if it was for the last time. I smiled back at her, reassuring I wasn't leaving, and she left the room. I took a deep breath and relaxed myself, thinking, now it's time to cosplay and have some fun. I looked at my backdrop and seen that it was full of dust and pieces of hay from my guinea pigs. Upon the sight of that, I walked to it and started wiping the dust and picking the hay off it. Afterwards, I set up my lights with the red and blue filters so that I didn't have to do it in my makeup or binder. Finally, I gathered up my clothes for my Henry Jekyll cosplay and arranged each item on the desk. He was one of my comfort cosplays that I did quite frequently. The cosplay made me feel confident and creative. There was something about cosplaying as a man that made me feel powerful. I wasn't transgender or anything. I just liked cosplaying men for TikTok. I grabbed all my accessories for Henry Jekyll and my makeup bag. When I was done prepping myself for the makeup process, I grabbed my phone, went to my playlist, and pressed the song Just the Two of Us by Grover Washington Jr. I set up my phone in the phone stand and went back to my desk. As I looked upon my desk, I decided to talk to myself aloud. All right, let's get to work, Abby. And I started my transformation process. I began to cover my face with contour and eyeshadow. I needed to shadow in my cheekbones and nose to make them appear broader and muscular, like a man's face. The whole point of this was to trick people and make myself look as realistic as possible. I was always known to go the extra mile with anything, so this was no different. As I was in mid-transformation, I forgot that I didn't change into my cosplay clothes. I decided to speak out loud to myself again and begin to strip down. The reason why I changed my clothes before all my makeup was on was because I had to use face paint for my beard. I didn't want to try and take off my t-shirt with all of the paint on my face. I didn't want to ruin my clean gray shirt. I know that it's washable and it would come out, but why make a bigger mess if you can just avoid it? Another reason is also because I had to put on my binder for my chest. I knew how dangerous binders were and how badly they can hurt after you wear them for a while. But I liked how they hid my breasts for the cosplay. It helped bring the character to life. I knew the binder could not fully disguise my boobs, no matter how tight I put it. I always clasped it as loose as it could go. It held the lumps of flesh back as best it could, but it still formed two small bumps. My girls were never really concealed within it, but a baggy shirt fixed that problem right away. I began to put on my male white button-up shirt, with fake blood splattered across the right side, and my formal black pants. I tucked the shirt loosely within the pants so I could still move around and continue putting on my makeup. Since I was done with the contouring and shadowing of my face, I decided that it was time to apply the black face paint. I prepped my container of paint by wetting it with a few dabs of water. Afterwards, I took a mascara brush and began to spread the paint along the side of my face, trying to form a sideburn. I stroked the brush from the bottom of my jawline upward to form a spike that resembled potential little hairs on my face. As I finished the one side, I started to think about the cosplay and how I needed to get into character. I was almost done with the transformation process, so I knew it was time to practice my acting skills for him. Then, I suddenly remembered that I could listen to the Jekyll and Hyde album that was on my musical playlist. Upon that thought, I started to turn myself to my phone stand. As I did so, I felt my hand touch some sort of object. I looked at my hand as it stayed in place. Nothing was there. My hand was placed in thin air, but it still felt like I was touching something. Curious about this illusion, I decided to play along and grab at this said object. As I did so, my fingers started to feel like they were touching some sort of fabric. Then, looking at the formation of my hand, it appeared to be wrapping around an arm of some sort. At the same time, though, I wasn't sure what I was grabbing at. I was certainly confused about what was going on, but it scared the shit out of me at the same time. I was touching something that wasn't there. My grip released instantly, and my hand pulled back upon the thought. "What the hell?" I uttered as I started to feel lightheaded. I suddenly became tired, and my body felt heavy, and as quick as a flash, I fell to the floor and fainted. I woke up after a minute to darkness. I couldn't see anything, but I felt that I was laying on some sort of soft ground. My head began to hurt, but it faded after a bit. I lifted myself off the ground and stood up in what seemed to be a dark void. The pitch blackness started to become eerie the longer I stood in it. To calm my nerves, I decided to speak. "Hello? Is anyone here with me?" Suddenly, a bluish-purple light began to shine where I was standing. My eyes took a minute to adjust, and when they did, I found myself staring at a barrier of some sort. It was see-through, and I could see the light shining through it. However, beyond the light, there was still darkness. I pressed my hand up against the invisible wall to find that it resembled glass, but more appeared like a bubble. I could feel a slight swaying as I stood still and truly focused on it, like the rocking a mother gives her child when they are upset. Otherwise, it wasn't that noticeable when my mind was thinking about other things. I began to turn myself around and was exposed to the rest of my surroundings. I found my eyes staring at what looked to be a queen-size bed with a canopy on it. The curtains that strung down from the top of it were a magenta color along with the carpet. The rest of the room had bookshelves full of books, beanbags, games, and a stereo with a bunch of CDs around it. I noticed that there were no closets or doors that led anywhere. It was just a room in a bubble. Nothing else. I walked myself closer to the middle of the room. I could see that the bed frame and the canopy were made up of dark oak wood and was polished in order to shine its brightest. The curtains looked like they were made out of an opaque satin fabric that would be soft to the touch. I started to reach for the curtain when suddenly the stereo acted up and started to play. I looked to the right to see the music coming out of the speakers. The song that started to play was Bed by Jay Holiday. I heard the sound of rustling fabric and immediately knew it was the curtain of the bed moving. I spun around to find that the curtain closest to me was opening to reveal a man that had jeans on and no shirt sitting on the bed. However,
it wasn't just any man. It was Damien. How the hell was he here? Why was he here? And why was he shirtless? Damien, what is going on? I asked as he stood up. He didn't say a word and walked towards me with his protruding abs and muscles. He stopped as soon as he was face to face with me. He only was a little taller than me, so there wasn't that much of a height difference. He then proceeded to run his fingers down each of my arms to the bottom of my shirt. He gently started lifting it up to take it off, and the next thing I knew, I willingly lifted my arms and allowed him to. What was wrong with me? I would never permit anyone to do that to me, not even my closest friend. But I felt so entranced by him. The way he looked at me with his eyes just made me feel needy. For what exactly? I wasn't sure. I stood there exposed with my bra and pants on while he stared at me.
You look absolutely breathtaking, Abby.
I started to chuckle in disbelief. Yeah, sure, Damien. Funny joke.
No, Abby. I mean it.
Prove it then. The next thing I knew, Damien swiftly swept me up into a cradle and held me in his arms. As I was still in shock, he carried me to the bed and laid me down as if I was fragile. He then began to crawl into bed with me, and the curtains behind him closed. It was just me and him, no one else. I had charming Damien all to myself, and no one was permitted to stop it. He moved towards me and ended up on top, straddling me. I now had a front row view of his six-pack and rippling pectorals. He bent himself down towards my face and brushed it with his hand. His fingers were tender as he ran his hand beside my face.
You still want me to prove it?
Damien asked teasingly. I don't know what happened to me, but I started feeling a tightness in my stomach, and my own breath was taken away. I knew that this was wrong, and this wasn't right, but I wanted to see where this was going to go. Out of nowhere, my body answered his question for me. Oh, Damien, please. And the next thing I knew, Damien began to kiss me on my lips. I tasted his cherry-flavored chapstick as he kept kissing me with his tender lips. My mind was exploding with fireworks and my chest was overwhelmed with feelings I wasn't used to. My body started taking control over me and gently grabbing the back of his head, caressing it gently, just like he was with me. As the makeout session continued on, I started feeling something pressing into my pants. I could feel it as Damien shifted his weight on me and continued on with his incredible kissing. After a few seconds, I realized what it was and gasped in shock. Damien ceased himself as he realized the panic I just had. He sat himself up and stared at me intently as I began to sit up as well.
What's wrong, Abby? Did I do something wrong?
He asked, concerned. I looked to see a bump was down by his pants, confirming my thoughts. I began to look at Damien in the face and spoke. No, Damien, you were fine. More than fine. You just
what?
I just didn't think I could do that to anyone, I said, pointing at his hard-on caused by my kiss.
You do more than just that to me.
But how? I am not like the other girls you know. I'm not...
Abby, that's what I like most about you. You are the most beautiful girl I have met, and you wear your heart on your sleeve. I don't want the other girls. I want you.
I let out a slight gasp and started to blush. He began to kiss me again, intimately. His words circled in my head and his kiss flooded my senses.
He began to lay me back down for another makeout session. As we continued, he started to unbutton my pants and pull them down to expose my underwear. He then stopped to ask me one final thing.
Do you, Abby Davis, give me consent?
Yes, my body said, taking control again. As he started to bend down again, I was jolted away from the scene and stumbled forward. I was suddenly back in my body. I caught myself from falling and started to examine myself. What the fuck happened? I said aloud in confusion and terror. What the hell just happened to me? Where was I? How did I get there? And why the hell did I want to go back so badly? Damien would never think of me like that. And I never would have thought of him like that either. Was that some sort of dream from my inner thoughts that I didn't know about? But the most important question, why did I even black out? I never ever did that before. I was in good health. Well, I was a little overweight, but I have no problems that would have caused a blackout. So why did it happen now?
Abby, can you hear me?
I heard a random voice in my head. It wasn't the sound of my conscience, and it wasn't a voice I recognized. However, the voice was deep and soothing like a man's voice. I still felt frightened by it, though. What? Who's there? What are you? I called back to the voice.
Hey, Abby, it's okay. It's kinda hard to explain, but my name is Darius. I'm here to protect you.
Darius? This thing that was talking in my head had a name? And what the hell would this thing protect me from? I could protect myself just fine, and so could my parents. I didn't need some fictional being to protect me. I really started to think that I was slowly going insane. What? No, I'm going crazy. This isn't real. This isn't real. But what if I am going crazy?
You're not crazy, Abby. I am just as shocked about this as you are. I just don't want to scare you right now by you seeing me. That's why I am communicating with you like this.
If you're real, then show yourself. Prove to me that I'm not crazy. If this thing was a true being, I wanted to see it myself.
I don't think that's a good idea. But okay.
I looked behind me to see him slowly appearing in front of my backdrop. As I looked upon him, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was face to face with a demon. He was almost as tall as my backdrop, with his horns sticking out of his head. They were a tannish color with black detailed lines within the creases of the horns. He had a black comb-over hairstyle that seemed to be perfectly brushed and shaped. His eyes were an intense yellowish-green color, staring down at me. His skin was a red color, but moving downward, I could see that the color started to lighten by his chest. The shirt that he wore was red silk, and he had waved textures on it that glimmered in the lights. His sleeves were rolled up halfway up his arm, revealing his somewhat muscular forearm. Along with the shirt, he wore black formal pants, just like I was, with the shirt tucked in loosely. I never would have guessed that a demon would have dressed so nicely, but the fact still remained. He was still a demon, and I was terrified.
Surprise, I guess?
He said, shrugging his shoulders. You're a demon, I stuttered, trying to find the words to come out of my mouth. He tried speaking and stumbled over his words as well. He paused himself, lifted his hands, and took a deep breath.
I need to explain. Just please let me explain.
I didn't say anything. I was too scared to.
I didn't know what he was going to do to me, but I also felt like I needed to let him explain himself. So we stood in silence. I stared at him, petrified, and waited for him to speak again.
This has been Chapter 3, Ordinary Life, from The Snake and the Rose. Tune in to the next video for Chapter 4. Thank you for listening.